Welcome to Discography, the music podcast that delivers the objective truth about the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever existed. I'm your host, Dave Gebrow, and if you're tuning in for the first time, ask yourself this. Do you think most modern discussions about music lack a certain fire and perspective in lieu of being coddling and accepting, when clearly there's a right and wrong answer in everything music related? If your answer is yes, yes, and yes again, then welcome home. Please join our Facebook group, Discography Soldiers of Sound. It's good times wherever you look. We're on Instagram and Twitter too, but the Facebook group is home of artists, writers, filmmakers, musicians, you name it. Overall, a melting pot of unbelievably talented sons of bitches. On whatever platform you call home, you'll be privy to a never-ending flow of ongoing bonus content, giveaways, free swag, and encouraging words of wisdom on how to never, ever give up on your rock and roll dreams of maintaining a Lester Bangs-like perspective deep into adulthood. If you wouldn't mind, please pause this, actually. Join the group, and then join up on all the rest of the platforms too. Then, and again, I am saying please rate the podcast 5 stars along with a beautifully worded review, especially if you're on Apple or Spotify. It'll really help us a lot. Don't forget, the link to our legendary playlist is in the show notes and also on our website at discography.com. This is an invaluable resource if, like me, you just hate listening to shitty songs. Lastly, but not leastly, a heartfelt Discography thanks goes out to Joe Cravino and my wife Jen, without whose invaluable help on the show, we would be entirely dead in the water. I care too much about this show to be entirely easy to deal with, and so also, I'm sorry. Okay, first things first. You need to know just how seriously I take this nonsense. Discography is heavily researched, and the music is always reassessed with fresh ears. We're not just covering albums. No, sirree Bob. We do a searingly honest deep dive analysis of all EPs, singles, comp tracks, relevant solo work, and bootlegs. Every release is slapped with an objectively accurate star rating between 0 and 5, which allows us all to come face to face with the true shape of an artist's overall arc. In this episode of Discography, we'll be turning our spray cans on Big Star. The remnants of Beatle magic alchemized into the greatest, most sparkling power pop that ever was, turned the abyss that swung around and stared right back. But before we go any further here, we have a very special gentleman in the proverbial house this morning. For this young man, things took off with a shot in 1997 when he co-founded a music magazine called Rebel Root, which procured global distribution via Tower Records. That's when All Music, then called the All Music Guide, came a-callin', and they seduced our dude with a gig writing bios and reviews. In 2014 came the venerable and unerringly impressive Dangerous Minds, for whom he's to date written hundreds of articles, including several in-depth stories related to the mysterious record labels that existed solely as tax shelters in the 70s and 80s. In recent years, he's also written for Lethal Amounts, and last year he wrote a Van Halen story for them that kind of went a wee bit viral, if you want to know the truth. And to top off that rock and roll Sunday, later on down the line, tonight's guest got his master's degree in library science archival administration and landed a gig at the Henry Ford Museum's archive, where he wrote some pieces for their website. The learning never ends and the mind never stops growing, a notion of which one is constantly re-reminded in this very nice badass mother effer's conceptual presence. Lads and ladies of Discography Village, will you please all blurt out at once in collective wanton abandonment in an awkward attempt at welcoming Bart Bealmear. Bart?
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. You give the greatest introductions in all of podcasting.
That's because we only have the most incredible people in the universe on the show, and they're worthy of such adulation.
Well, thank you. Will you speak at my funeral?
Hopefully not as soon as is humanly possible. So,
well, it's great to be here. Thank you. I'm a fan of the show, so it feels like I'm kind of inside of a movie that I've seen several times that I like quite a bit.
That's really cool. And as a listener, I know that you actually have. I know you've listened to more than a small handful of episodes because you actually reached out to me.
I did, yeah.
One of the first episodes where I was, reached out to by someone out in the wilderness, and I was so excited to get the email. I've had other pitches before, and I appreciate all of them, honestly. But, we're trying to grow the podcast, and to have you reach out was so thrilling. I think I emailed you back within seconds.
Yeah, I was honestly surprised because when I hit send, I thought, well, I probably won't hear from anybody. I didn't expect a response at all, to tell you the truth, and so to hear back from you right away, it was great.
Well, I'd like to think it's because you think I'm a big asshole.
Absolutely not. Come on.
No, why did you expect no response?
Well, you put things out there and you just, you hope for the best, but you expect nothing, I was essentially cold emailing you. So
I'm intrigued because this actually, without tipping the hat as to who we're covering tonight, the theme of disappointment and dashed expectation, it certainly plays into tonight's artist. But all right, so the main change that you see now that you're behind the veil, as it were, is that Joe is not here. So Joe Kennedy, I started the show with. Joe, actually, it was, even though this is a show about my specific music listening habits, it was his idea to do the podcast. And this is the very first full discography-based episode without Joe. And I'm curious, as a listener, how that notion, if and how that affects you.
Well, I was honestly a bit bummed, because I was, again, instantly a fan of the show, and you guys obviously had a really good rapport. And so even listening to some episodes, after I already knew that, it was, a little bit sad to know that you guys wouldn't be doing this again, and I was also looking forward to being on with both of you. So, but I was thrilled to hear that you're continuing.
Well, I would like to apologize for the compromised experience you're about to have. But no, seriously, this has been like sort of the dark night of the soul. It's a lot of work to do this. I don't blame Joe. Yeah. Joe and I are still very, very close friends. It didn't have an effect on our friendship. But it's a big ask. We didn't know how much work this was going to be. We went into it as pallies, looking for a justification to hang out as adults.
Yeah.
And we got that. We got a little bit more than we bargained for, and it wound up being okay with me, although still not sustainable, but okay with me, and just not okay with him, and it just is what it is. But I didn't know what I was going to do, but I'm definitely going to continue with the show. And
great.
Super excited that Big Star is the first one out of the gate. And we promise to keep bringing you, really, the thing that's king here is the format. So with that being said, back to business. Let's talk about what these guys, this is obviously a show about Big Star. Let's talk about what they mean to you, Bart. What do they really mean to you?
Wow, that's a weighted question. And I guess I should say, too, before we even get started, I'm sure there's a lot of listeners that think, why is this guy, what are his qualifications? And I'm right there with you.
So you're doubting yourself.
Well, it's not like I've written a biography on Big Star or something, but I have written several articles about them over the years for Dangerous Minds, and some Chilton articles as well, just about him solo. But Big Star, a band that I discovered the way I think a lot of people did my age. I'm 52, so I was a teenager when when the Replacements released the song Alex Chilton. And by then, I was head over heels for the Replacements. They were my favorite band in a sense. They really still are to this day. And so I paid attention, and so I bought Radio City, and I was, instantly hooked. I don't quite remember, listening to it for the first time or anything, but, just the songs are incredible. The songwriting's incredible. The performances, everything about it's just, I think it's a perfect record. And then I sort of branched out from there, and became, a fan of Chilton solo. Saw him a number of times. But all the Big Star records are special and unique in their own ways, which we will, be talking about here today.
Yeah. Well, I am going to close my eyes a bit here because when I discovered Big Star, and it has a very emotional resonance to me. Just some bands, they hit you at a certain time and are ineffably pulled into a strong undercurrent of a meaningful part of your life, and that's the summer of '92. So I remember sitting in my room reading, I believe it was Rolling Stone, back when I actually read them even intermittently, and read about the Ryko re-release of Third. That was my first, I'm 20 years old, and I'd never even heard them before, or heard of them. So I buy Third, and that summer of 1992 was just a magical summer for me. I was 20 years old. I was in Boston University, living in Allston. Time basically didn't exist. I remember the beginning of the summer literally taking a hammer to my watch just to exist outside of time and space as we knew it. That summer I discovered Third, and then in short order discovered the work of what sounded like a completely different band, the preceding two albums. And so let's also talk about, discovering at 20 years old, literally the perfect 3-album career / descent into oblivion. So, what struck me as a young man back then was, how is this the same band from album to album? I mean, there's a through line here, but there's such a story being told here, and the story is as interesting as the music. And, over the years, what's become apparent to me is that if someone tells me that, they know the obvious greats, the Joni, the Bobs, the Neils, and they're interested in digging a little deeper and seeing just what's under the covers, this is the first band I would introduce to someone, because there'd be a 0% rejection rate.
Yeah. Yeah, they're a hard band to dislike.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once you hear them, yeah.
So, okay, so this is a little segment that I like to call the run-up, and there's not a huge run-up here, but there's, some interesting factoids to touch on. The first thing I'd like to touch on in the run-up, and the run-up, by the way, gets us to the very first release, Chris Bell, who's, I would like to sort of focus on as if we could pick one man in the limelight tonight, that would be Chris Bell. He kicked things off with his first high school band, the Jinx. That's Jynx. And they have a release in '65, the Jinx Greatest Hits. The cover of the 45 says, unreleased 1965 Memphis Garage, featuring Chris Bell of Big Star and Bill Cunningham of the Box Tops. So, Bart, why don't you actually talk to us about this one? You actually introduced this to me. I'd never heard it before.
Yeah, so these are 1965 recordings from Chris's band, like you said, and Alex actually, he and Chris had met the same year, and Alex had sang a few times with Jinx, and he was supposed to record with the band, singing lead vocals for this session, but he flaked and he didn't show. So they had to get another singer at the last minute to sing on the recordings. But the whole purpose of them was so they could have songs that they could lip sync to when they were going to be appearing on a local American Bandstand type program. So that was the whole reason for doing it. yeah, so this is just a kind of interesting document of Chris's first studio recordings. Although,
yeah,
I think it's kind of mediocre garage rock.
It is. It's like that sneering, nasty, sort of chocolate watch bandy. It's like they aimed for the Rolling Stones and they kind of landed on Chocolate Watch Band.
Yeah, we'll go with that. And yeah, I think in part because of the singer is kind of unremarkable, and you're kind of left to wonder what it would have sounded like with Alex singing. It could have been great with a different singer. Even though the tunes aren't necessarily stellar, but we'll never know. But
it's not canon, but I think the best track on this is "And My Baby's Gone."
Okay. I did not pick a favorite track, but
no need.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of all of a piece. Not very traceable either to the sound that eventually coalesced with our boys. And you never place it as Chris Bell.
No.
But still very cool. It's hard to miss when this is the sound you're going after. Then let's cross-cut here. There's another guy from 67 to 70, a guy named Alex Chilton was the lead singer for the Box Tops, who had a #1 hit with a song called "The Letter" when he was 16 years old. There's other really cool stuff that they've done. I really like a song called "Neon Rainbow." Some other really cool stuff. But after he left the group, he recorded a solo studio album. He was offered the role of lead vocalist for Blood, Sweat, and Tears, which I didn't know until this trawl. But he turned down the offer. Did you know that, Bart?
I have it somewhere in my memory, but I did not remember that. So that's a crazy bit of trivia there.
What's weird about it is that it's David Clayton Thomas has such an affected voice. I mean, they talk about going in a completely different direction. But Chilton,
they were probably asking him, based on his Box Tops voice. That was
So Chilton had known Chris Bell for some time. So they'd both lived in Memphis. They'd recorded at Ardent Studios, which is a place that's going to be brought up many, many a time during this episode. So initially, correct me if I'm wrong here, Bart, was the first advance of one guy to another, Chilton asking Chris Bell to work with him as a duo, sort of modeled on a Simon and Garfunkel approach?
Yeah, I do think there was talk of that. Yeah, when Alex was living in New York City, after he had either quit the Box Tops or around the time he had quit the Box Tops, the time frame's a little uncertain. He was definitely thinking about leaving the Box Tops when he moved to New York, and formally left in February of 1970. But there was some talk of that, and then
Bell actually said no. That he was the one who played hard to get, which the dynamic kind of changed a little bit later on. But he did invite Chilton. He did invite Chilton to a performance of Ice Water, which at the time was it was kind of a band, but kind of not really a band, like more of a collective of whoever was around at the time. So it was, I think at that moment in time, it was Bell, Jody Stevens, who was the drummer, and bassist Andy Hummel, which was Big Star, except for Chilton. So Chilton liked the music and showed the three of them his new song, Watch the Sunrise. And that was pretty much it. He was asked to join the band. So subsequently, all the songs he brought to the table were included on that first record. But yes, it was really Chris Bell's band at the outset.
Yeah, totally. And then, so what happened was that they agreed to work on a project together. Chris and Alex did. It wasn't named Big Star or anything yet. It was just they were going to do something together. So I'm not sure if we're really jumping ahead. We're sort of jumping around a bit, I guess. But Chris started this thing called Rock City, which was really meant as a way for him to, in part, get his engineering chops up to work on this, unnamed Bell Chilton project, because Chris Bell had learned a lot already at that point about engineering from John Fry,
John Fry's
the owner of Ardent.
I mean, wouldn't you say he's probably outside of the band itself? John Fry's got to be the most important guy in the Big Star saga.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, the transference of Beatle magic from the Beatles to Big Star would not have been a possibility had it not been for John Fry.
No, he was really their George Martin, and if you're going to say fifth member of Big Star, he'd certainly be it.
If you don't mind, before we get into the meat and potatoes of the sort of Ardent in-house engineering trial by fire school, if we could talk about the two roads that converged in that space. So let's talk about Alex Chilton's Free Again, the 1970 sessions, and Chris Bell's Looking Forward. Then let's get into Ardent. So we're sort of jumping back here, but we are now at the point where they are big stars. So phase one, Watch the Sunrise, 1969 to 1972. 1970, Alex Chilton, Free Again, the 1970 sessions. 1970s in quotes, because I think this stuff was actually recorded mainly in 1969. He was in the band. He was in the box office for a very short period of time. And so what happened there? So because his experience there certainly colored his reaction of what occurred in Big Star.
Well, yeah, it was relatively short. It was a few years, but for him, since he was only 16 when the band started, that was kind of a long 3-4 years for someone that young. And they did so much touring. They did 200 plus dates a year, and Chilton just sort of looked at it as a slog after a while, and he really wasn't given much creative freedom at all.
All he really got was hastily recorded B-sides, right? That's the bones.
That's all. That's the only bones where they would throw him, and so at least he got some royalties from that from those B-sides. But he was frustrated and he was worn out. He was just tired of the grind.
Yeah. So he decompresses by coming back to Memphis, really kind of holing up in Ardent Studios with John Fry and another name that's going to pop up, not always in the best light as far as I'm concerned.
I can't wait till we talk about
but the engineer Terry Manning. So these guys are psyched to work with Chilton. And Chilton, at this point, he kind of doesn't know who he is. He's trying to find his way. And it's interesting. The sessions, they're very casual, very low-key, and it's a full album of material that was never released until 10 years ago, right?
Well, the sort of sequence of it is in '85, a few tracks came out on a compilation called Lost Decade, which incidentally is the only Chilton-related thing I reviewed for AllMusic. And then in '96, revived Ardent Records released a version of it on CD with more tracks. And then Omnivore in 2011 did a full CD with alternate mixes and takes and such. So that's now the definitive version of it.
There's interesting stuff, and then there's stuff on this that is absolutely, totally uninteresting to me. So, he's a kid. He doesn't know really kind of what he's doing yet. He's got maybe half of this, maybe a little less than half, is really interesting. There's a couple of great songs. The best track is the EMI song "Smile for Me."
Oh, that's interesting. You think it's that one? I think that's a great song, but to me, "Free Again" is the standout.
Free Again's cool, but what I don't like, and by the way, it's so perfectly indicative of Chilton, is that okay? So now that we've got his exploding out into coming into his own, his vocals are they're weird. It sounds wonky, rough-hewn, thrown down like a guide vocal, and disproportionately unpretty next to that fucking ripping pedal steel.
Well, yeah, and he's, like you said, he's trying to find his footing, really, and his voice, because his box top voice, is not really his natural singing voice, as we hear with Big Star. he was, I guess there's debate about whether he was actually coached or not to sing that way, but I believe that he was. He was coached to sing like a much older man. And, in fact, a lot of people thought he was black, thought that they thought Big Star was like an old soul band, basically, or the Box Tops were when they hit with the letter.
There's not a lot of Big Stars. So look, you and I have gone through and had way more than any discussions I've had with any of our guests yet about how best to shape this, because we care. We really care about how this turns out. Even if I knew there was going to be no listeners, I could never live with myself knowing that I didn't do the ultimate podcast on Big Star. And I don't have to ask you to know that you feel the same way, because you have a hologram cover of their Satanic Majesty's Request on you, and you're wearing a T-shirt of the Psych hard rock private press masterpiece Stonewall, which goes for thousands of dollars a copy. Even if your version skips, you get thousands of dollars. So I don't need to ask you. Moving right back into this, it isn't. What I like about this record is that there's aspects of it that are very open-hearted and vulnerable, and we don't get that kind of glimpse into Chilton ever again. It isn't always that easy. All we ever got from them was pain. These are really good songs, and they're presented in a way that doesn't obfuscate the point. So you get a real direct glimpse into him. So ultimately, mostly the record, I think, is a revelation in terms of who brought what to the table as the introductory assemblage of the building blocks that started coming together for Big Star. But I'm really actually was shocked in terms of the level of pastiche on display here, because it's similarly tossed off as his later Who Gives a Fuck records. I would characterize the 1970 record as of historical interest mainly, a sack of shit that intermittently spits out a bright and shiny banger. I give it 2.5 stars.
I mean, I think it's a really fun record. We've discussed previously how you feel about Chilton's solo material, I'm really a fan of it, and I do think it's a fun record. And I will admit that his songwriting certainly improved by leaps and bounds very quickly. But I think the songs are pretty together. Like, it doesn't really have that tossed up feeling to me. And did I mishear you? Did you say we never see him this vulnerable again?
Not this vulnerable. Not even in Big Star when he's vulnerable. This is explicit vulnerability. It isn't always that easy. It's almost like the song titles are adages.
That's interesting, because I think he can be quite vulnerable on the Big Star stuff. But the one you singled out, All We Ever Got Was Pain. It's kind of an intense one. In fact, that's the one I can kind of imagine on Big Star's third. Yeah,
totally. That'd be great on
So I have for my very first rating on Discography, I give it 3 1/3 stars.
Oh, dude, I love you. You know how I feel about it. The quickest way to a man's heart if he's hosting a music podcast is resort to bizarre fraction. All right, so moving along, 1969 to 1971, we have a CD, whatever the hell it was initially, that came out called Looking Forward, The Roots of Big Star, and this encompasses Ice Water and Rock City. So Ice Water, just to differentiate here, Ice Water came first. Ice Water wasn't really a band. It was more like a rotating collective of whomever. Rock City was a specific project run by Chris Bell and singer Tom Eubanks. In fact, the later 1970 to early 71 Rock City sessions, they morphed right into those for the just born Big Star, because you have Jody on drums and Andy on bass, although Andy didn't play any bass on those actual recordings. The record was going to be called C7 States and features the very first Bell Chilton composition, which is an early version of Try Again. It was a quasi-rock opera. So Eubanks apparently shopped that shit around to no avail, but Rock City was the springboard for Big Star. And in Bell's mind, it was also a dry run for working with Chilton right around the bend. To me, this is of more interest than the Chilton stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I like some of this stuff. And of course, there's the early versions of My Life Is Right and Try Again, which both were the basis. These actual recordings were the basis for the ones they used on number one record. So actually the songs on number one record, the versions are the Rock City versions. They're just augmented on there. So, of course, those are great songs. A lot of the stuff doesn't really stick with me. I will say also Ice Water was kind of a real band. They did play shows. They did, rotate members like seemingly like most early Chris Bell bands did.
And also, to be clear, it's not just Ice Water and Rock City. There's also other fly-by-night outfits that he had from the time, like Christmas Future. The Wallabies is another one that you kind of hear about quite a lot that's on here. Those are the main ones. There's like 4 bands on here. That's all Chris Bell stuff.
Well, it's actually not entirely, which is weird because it's credited to Chris Bell, but there's a couple songs that he doesn't even
not even on
appear. Yeah, he's not even on. Yeah. And like the Wallabies thing wasn't even a Chris Bell project. In fact, the guy behind that doesn't even remember meeting Chris.
That's hysterical.
But Chris does play on those Wallabies recordings on there. And there's also for historical trivia or whatever here that the song Psychedelic Stuff, which isn't really much of a song, is the first thing Chris ever recorded at Ardent.
Oh, that's cool. That's great. I feel bad saying this, but they're my 2 favorite songs on the record. One of them is the one that Chris doesn't appear on. The Wind Will Cry for Me by Rock City is very beautiful. But the other one that I really like, I Lost the Love by Rock City, killer early power pop.
It's kind of I thought of Raspberries too.
Yeah.
When I was listening to that song. So it's I think Raspberries hadn't even quite existed yet then, so it's you can call it Proto Raspberries, I think. Proto Raspberries.
Eric Carmen would certainly like that descriptor. All I See Is You is another good one. This is kind of is redolent of the Beatles circa Yes It Is, that sort of pillowy harmony kind of a thing. I mean, overall, it's on a similar level as Chilton. It's nascent. It's not necessarily, I wouldn't call it of historical interest. It exists on its own merits. But as far as the pre-Big Star talent pool, of the late 60s, early 70s, for my money, Bell had Chilton eating his dust, but there was still a long way to go. So this is all sort of a trial and error, hunt and peck. But even the stuff that doesn't work on the Chris Bell thing is interesting. And it's a hell of a lot closer to the Big Star template than Chilton's thing. I give it 3 stars.
I gave it the same, 3 stars. Yeah, I think it's interesting for Big Star fans. I'm not sure if there's really anybody else who'd be much interested in this stuff. But yeah,
Agreed.
3 stars.
Okay, now I can't wait for this, even though this has nothing to do with Big Star. So the engineer Terry Manning wound up making a solo record in 1970 called Home Sweet Home. Chris Bell plays on it. A lot of the same dudes who are hanging around Ardent wound up laying down tracks on everything, including this. You are a wonderful human being, because I'm always the guy who's like, oh, and I forgot this record. Oh, and you got to listen to this one. It was never the guest doing it to me, and it's a dream situation for me. So I'm lapping it up and
turn Nightmare, because
not at all. No,
the first song I know.
I love a bad record. I love a good record. Okay, so first to lay down the gauntlet here, Terry Manning produced, engineered, and except for drums, handled most of the instrumentation. Again, of course, Chris Bell is on it as well. So now let's talk about that Ardent Petri dish. So by 1972, Big Star... by the way, I hate Terry Manning's record. It's an NA as far as star ratings go. I would give it a half star just for the balls to...
Ooh, okay.
I hated it.
I might go, if we were doing this for real, I might go as high as 4.
Holy crap. All right, so the Ardent Petri dish. By 1972, the band had secured a record deal with Ardent, who had just signed a distribution deal with Stax. Okay, so let's talk about this setup, because this wound up sounding totally cool and being completely uncool. From all appearances, this was the only move to make. John Fry was not only was the owner and founder of Ardent and the studio while he was still in high school. He moved his stable of talented mother effers with him, including Jim Dickinson, who's a legendary figure, and Terry Manning. Led Zeppelin had recorded some of the 3 record there. Leon Russell and ZZ Top became fixtures. And then Fry wound up giving a sort of in-house engineering course. And early students included Chris Bell and Andy Hummel. Big Star was a studio-hatched creation. That's why it glimmers and it glows and it's timeless. So, right across the street, as they would stand outside on smoke breaks or what have you, a local grocery chain that was across the street from Ardent gave the band its name. And I think we can all agree it's not only a great name for a band, but the ironic distance between what happened and their name makes it way beyond even a perfect name. It's stamped in amber. So the setup is open access to Ardent, Ardent owner John Fry engineering, endless hours off the clock. Chris Bell was the McCartney figure, Chilton was the Lennon figure, as far as not just melody, but production approach and the whole deal. So the Beatle baton really was passed, and it couldn't even possibly fail, not by a long shot. Seriously, how could this conceivably go wrong? Record number 1, or should we just say number 1 record, 1972, released on April 24th, 1972 by Ardent, number 1 record. One of the greatest debut records of all time.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful, melancholy, upbeat, wonderful rock and roll record.
It should have been, it should have gone diamond, but it actually sold fewer than 10,000 copies when it was first released. In the late 70s. And
a lot less than that. I think it might have been less than 5,000.
Less than 5,000?
Yeah.
Which is absolutely insane. I mean, now, it's always ranked as one of the greatest albums of all time, but only because it is. This is the only Big Star album on which Chris Bell is actually credited as a member. Even people who are Big Star fans don't really, a lot of them aren't cognizant of that fact. He had a major hand in the record through the songwriting, the vocals, guitar work, the production. He's not there on the future stuff. So this has a very different character to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you were saying earlier, it was his band. It was, really, he spearheaded the whole thing. And but I mean, he and Alex have just, there's kind of a yin-yang thing going on with those two and their songwriting, because they did, they brought songs to the table individually, but they did do some collaboration. In fact, Chris later said Alex was the only person that he could write with. So they did do some working together. But yeah, I mean, Alex brought Ballad of El Goodo, and I think he said, like you said, Watch the Sunrise.
Yeah, and
were a couple of tracks that he brought.
Yeah, I mean, it really is kind of back and forth with these guys. Bell had Feel, In the Street, Don't Lie to Me, My Life Is Right, Try Again. I mean, both of them brought a lot to the table. So
yeah, I mean, In the Street is actually Alex's song, but Chris sings it. That's the only one on the album that was primarily written by somebody else that somebody else sang. So,
and then let's also not forget the India song was Andy Hummel, and the reason I'm singling that out, it's always been one of my favorite songs on the record. One of the things that is just so crazy about these guys to me is that when the guys who aren't even known as the legendary songwriters, when they step up to the plate, it's always with a great song.
Well, I have a lot to say about the India song, because for me it never quite works. It seems like it sort of really sticks out on the record because it doesn't sound like anything else. I don't think it's a particularly good song. I think it would have been a fine B-side.
Oh my God, I would engage in a physical altercation. That would be an arrestable offense right now if we were in physical.
Dave,
this is it
touched a nerve.
It's just always been it's a special one for me. Even though I will grant you the fact that it is sort of a generic lyrically generic, etc. But let's actually just walk through this one, slowly and look at this. So the way that it starts, because this album is really worth it. This is not just an incredible album, it is one of the greatest, probably in the top 10 of all time, not probably, debut records ever. So side one, track one, the song Feel by Chris Bell. We kick off with a rocker and those 10-foot tall descending harmonies, just a top shelf ass kicker and a terrific red herring when the album winds up devolving into folky rumination toward the end.
Yeah, it's one hell of an opener, right? I mean, in an ideal world, this would have been a AM radio smash hit. I mean, it's even got the sax influence there with the horns and the sax but yeah, it's also like a lot of Big Star stuff. It's kind of deceptive because it's a very up-tempo track, and then it slips into the I feel like I'm dying, never gonna live again, you ain't just been trying. It's getting there very near the end, where it's kind of a more melancholy passage, and then it kicks back in again. But an incredible opener that just love that
really
song.
Solid opener. And then Ballad of El Goodo, we go into, that's Chilton's first appearance, songwriting-wise, on a Big Star record, and it's a total classic. I mean, here's where the sweetness is dolloped on in great big gobs. Even if you're not listening intently to it, these little lyrical passages that fly right by you, they stay with you forever. Ain't no one gonna turn me round.
This one seems to be about Alex's experiences with the Box Tops, and the first of many defiant Alex songs that we will get over the years. But yeah, just the guitars are just gorgeous harmonies.
It really feels like the stars up in the sky. It really is just very, very beautiful. Obviously, this is a John Fry, Terry Manning influence thing, because I know guitars, most of the guitars I hear, they don't sound like that.
Yeah, I mean, John Fry's really giving credit for that. That shimmering sort of and the heavenly sound of the harmonies and all of that. But let's not forget Jody's drumming either.
Yeah, he's perfect for them.
And his drumming is so great that they're almost like his fills are almost like little hooks.
Yeah.
Like you can't imagine the songs without them. And that particular song, The Ballad of El Goodo, he said that he basically just learned that he played that stuff on the fly. So those parts are pretty much, what he was playing the first time he heard the song.
That's very impressive. The next song is probably the most famous song on the record because of its appearance on that 70s show, In the Street, written by Chris Bell, and initially the B-side to their first single, When My Baby's Beside Me.
Written by Alex, but sung by Chris.
Sorry. I have everything listed here by vocalist, and I'm mistaking it as singer, just in case you think I'm a complete and total idiot, and that I've lost all credibility. All right, so, and just as a song, this song, it's always been one of my favorites on the record. It's always been kind of a soundtrack to being young. And
totally,
if you're a listener of the show, then you're already familiar with the idea that I love the artistry behind coming up with a great lyric hook before a guitar solo. And Wish We Had a Joint So Bad is in the top 10 of all time.
Yeah, and I mean the song, is a total anthem for suburban teens. It makes sense that it was, it's a perfect theme song for that 70s show. And then those changes in the songs, the guitar chord changes it's like total power pop. To me, it's probably the most power poppy of all the Big Star songs, even though they get credit a lot as being like a proto power pop band. But this song specifically, I think, is very power poppy, and then the song just sparkles. It's just
really does. It does
sounds
sparkle.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, and that little passage right after Wish We Had a Joint So Bad, that particular sparkle always felt redolent to me of right after having smoked a joint. that sort of like stars on the periphery thing. Just
and Chris was very into. He and Andy were really into smoking pot.
I thought all of them were, weren't they all, or no?
I don't know that Jody got too into it, but yeah, I think probably they all dabbled at least. But I'm not sure about Jody. But yeah,
I think pretty much every picture I saw in the 70s when I was doing research on this of Jody, he's holding some kind of beer in his hand.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that might have just been his alcohol, maybe his drug of choice.
All right, so then next up we have 13. 13 for me, that's a Chilton song, of course, released as a single with Watch the Sunrise as the B-side, which, holy crap, what a single. This is one of the most perfect songs ever made. And I would like to mention Mary Lou Lord, who at the time, back in 1992, 30 years ago, she and I were spending a tremendous amount of time together. She introduced me to this song right around the time that I had bought the Ryko disc re-release of Third Sister Lovers, but before I had heard the first album. All the rock and roll self-mythologizing, very smartly already in place. Like that line about tell them what we said about Painted Black. It's very smart. There's a kid writing these lyrics, but he's thinking about how to, it's almost like, like Jeff Tweedy trying to think around the time of being there. Like, how can I create all these signifiers that put me right on the record shelf? But Chilton's doing that like decades earlier.
Well, and it's written from the perspective of a 13-year-old boy, and
right.
But it's not, it's not. Well, I guess there are maybe some cliches in it, but it's all deliberate, and there's definitely a charm to it. Could these be like the most beautifully recorded guitars in rock history?
Seriously,
I was going to ask you, have you ever heard of a guy called his name's Gimmer Nicholson?
Yes. How do I know that name? Well,
he recorded an album in '68, an instrumental album that remained unreleased for over 10 years, but it made the rounds in Memphis, and the big star guys heard it, and it was influential on the sound of this first record.
Currently writing down. If I write this shit down, it gets done. So I'm going to be listening to that as a come down from the intensity of this experience.
I recommend that to anybody who's listening and is a fan of Big Star and the production of this stuff and the sound of those acoustic guitars, because you'll definitely hear how they were inspired by it. That's another one you can easily find on Spotify.
The clarity and there's a lot of high end. It feels like they were able to capture that a lot of people don't somehow get access to sonically. Don't really know why, but it is really some of the, like for example, the acoustic guitar on Watch the Sunrise. They're able to get a tone on there that I'm not very familiar with on other recordings.
Well, I think that was all deliberate. I'm not an engineer by any stretch. But from what I gather is that what they were trying to do is they purposely made it have a lot of high end, because knowing that it'll be played on, if it was played on the radio, which that was the goal, that it would chop off some of that high end.
Right.
So it was an album literally made to be played on the radio.
Yeah, very wishful thinking. Don't Lie to Me is next, and that's a sick rocker, totally ferocious. Probably their most ferocious rocker. I love when the double-tracked vocals get when it's off sync, because he's so fucking fired up. That section right there is phenomenal. I've always loved it.
I love that. It reminds me of some of the early Beatles recordings too, where they're not singing exactly in sync. I mean, that's a co-lead vocal by Chris and Alex, and I guess behind the scenes, Chris was really pushing Alex to sing with force on that one, and it really comes across, and it's just such a nice melding of both their voices. I mean, I guess Chris's stands out a bit more, but it just brings to mind like those late period Beatles rockers, and I think some of those licks were probably stolen from Lennon's Cold Turkey.
Okay, the India song I really have always loved. It's always been one of my favorite songs on the record. And I love how it digs in hard with the melancholic introspection. It's sort of a tip of the hat to what's coming on side 2, which is extremely introspective. But it always affected me regardless. All the flutes.
No, yeah.
It tickles all the, all the patches of my scrotum that need to be musical.
I do like the Mellotron. I'm a sucker for Mellotron.
I love that stuff. I mean,
that is cool.
Every even all the shitty songs on the Moody Blues records from 67 to 72 are great. All right, side 2.
Sorry, I just want to say one more thing, because it'll make you feel maybe a bit vindicated by this, is that there was talk of Andy, who I don't know if we said wrote and sang this song, launching a solo career based off of this song, which caused friction within the band, especially once it failed. Chris was not too happy with the thought of Andy being off of the solo career.
Strange. Of all 4 people to focus on him, especially because his commitment to music, just in general, was wavering from the outset. Side 2, a very different side, a very different feel to it. If you're a fan of the album as a journey that takes you from one place to another, this is a great album side. So When My Baby's Beside Me, which I don't know how this was the single. To me, it's the worst song on the album.
No way.
Look,
wow.
I don't think it's a bad song. I just think I think it's only very good. I do fucking love how it ends, but it's not my favorite song on the album.
Well, let's just say too, this is the first rocker that Alex sings by himself on the record. I just love the song. I love that little rave up mid-song section. I think that's really great. I just think it's a really strong, upbeat rocker. Well, let me tell you this too. Alex didn't play many Big Star songs solo, and he would pretty much just play In the Street and September Girls sometimes when I would see him. But he played this once, and I've never seen more people happy, I don't think, in my life. It was that has nothing to do with really this album or
I'd be the only guy standing there weeping.
Why is he playing this crap song?
Yeah. I did once heckle Arthur Lee.
I've heard you're quite the heckler. Yeah.
I used to like that more. Now it's not a good look on a 50-year-old.
Well, what did you say to Arthur Lee?
Well, he played for 15 minutes and then was like, thank you, good night. And everyone was treating him like the venerable legend. But I was thinking of the money I just spent. And I said, I want my $6 back, you has-been. And he stumbled on an apology and, half-heartedly put his guitar strap back on. And I was responsible for what had to have been the worst closer of all time. It was a 25-minute rendition of Hey Joe that was the definition of superfluous. So then after When My Baby's Beside Me, we have My Life Is Right. And so begins the long emotional conclusion to the record. And all these songs feel of a piece. My Life Is Right is a masterwork. I love it.
Yeah, and I think it pairs well too with When My Baby's Beside Me. They're both ultimately positive songs about the impact of significant others, and though both speak to the darkness in life, because it seems like there can't be just a positive Big Star song. There has to be some darkness, in there.
Always fold in the darkness. It also flows very nicely into Give Me Another Chance, which is a Chilton song, and. This song is just gorgeous. First of all, those chord changes, just heartbreakers, and some of the lyrics in here. It's so hard just to say alive each day. I really can't go on this way. Hold on. I mean, come on. This song is so beautiful, so stunningly emotional and open-poured. It's one of my favorites on the record, and always has been.
Yeah, and those the layered vocals with the Mellotron, it's just incredible. And so this is the beginning of the just the acoustic based song sans drums. So we're in a run now, starting of a run of No Jody. So there's kind of more of like a folk maybe influence on these remaining tracks.
Right.
This is an album too that was really labored over for a long time. Chris, seemingly couldn't let it go. He tinkered with it off and on for, I think, around a year. They spent all together working on this album, and a lot of times when records are labored over, they don't, in the end, sound like it. They don't sound that good. But this is obviously not the case with this one.
Right. Try Again. This one kills me every last time. And the pensive, empathetic slide guitar work that traces its way through the song is perfection. And then Watch the Sunrise, probably my favorite song on the record. I get chills, in the 2 seconds of silence between Try Again and Watch the Sunrise, right before those chords come in hard like that. I always get chills down my spine. The sense of wonderment and the grasp of the beauty of life. I feel that every time I hear those opening strums without even hearing the lyrics.
Yeah, I love that.
And then at the very end, a marriage of our two main talents, Bell and Chilton together. ST 106. I don't even know how to say it. How do you say that?
I don't either. It's weird. I don't know if you know where this title came from.
I don't.
But so the album took so long to come out that the band members often joked that it would be bootleg before an official release, and that the title of the bootleg would be ST 100/6. Now, what that means, I have no idea. It was some sort of in-joke that they must have, that only they know. But so that's
it's barely a song. I mean, you can't really even consider it a song. It's like it's sort of a weirdo outro.
I think of it as because they're all singing on it. The instrumentation is very sparse, like on Because. But yeah, it's a short one. It's just kind of like a little outro almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it is kind of a nice low key way to end the album, and it kind of works with that. Post When My Baby's Beside Me tracks on side 2. It works well there.
So for number one record, the confluence of my personal life and the bright, shiny positivity of this record could not have dovetailed any better. Its appearance in my life was perfectly timed, from the good Lord up above, if you believe in that thing. If not, then that bad boy down below. One of the greatest albums of all time, fraught with all kinds of meaning for me. And of course, we touched on the sparkling, pristine production. This is a hard 5, ladies and gentlemen.
Dave, just so I can, maybe stay in your good graces, I'm going 4.95.
You scumbag. All right. So Stax proved unable to either promote or distribute the record with any degree of financial success, and when the band tried itself to get airplay to generate interest, fans couldn't even buy it because Stax couldn't make it available in a lot of stores. So the only copies people were able to find were promo copies in stores, which is crazy. So Stax was trying to improve the availability of what they had. So they signed a deal with Columbia, who obviously were successful distributors in the U.S., and it made Columbia responsible for all of Stax. But Columbia had no interest in dealing with the independent distributors previously used by Stax, and they removed even the existing copies of number one record from the stores.
Oh, geez, so, I never heard that part of the story.
Yeah, they got royally screwed on that.
Well, I think the only store you could really find them at, the record stores you could find them in, were in Memphis, but that's another part of the story too, is that Memphis was pretty ambivalent about Big Star. So even though there was no hometown love even for the band. But there's a lot of speculation about why the record failed, and there's a number of things you can't talk about other than distribution. But of course, that was a huge part of it because, they did get radio airplay in a lot of markets, but no one could buy the record. A lot of fans resorted to just writing Ardent directly to get copies of the album. Because they couldn't find them in stores, but also the band did not really support the record with a lot of live dates. I think the original Big Star only played about 10 dates total. Like Chris during this period got intense stage fright and just really hated performing for some reason during this period. And
a lot of people don't realize this, and I don't even think I was cognizant of it. Chris was out of the band by the end of the year.
Yeah, he was devastated. He put everything into number one record, and its failure just I don't know that he ever recovered from it.
I don't. It sounds like he didn't. I mean, I don't know if I would have. I mean, It seemed pretty obvious that the record was destined for success. So when something is destined for success and it doesn't make it. There was no like maybe this will do well. When you hear it, it's like, it's a classic. So it's sad because this is a guy who, and we'll touch on this in a bit as well, psychologically was a very delicate human being. So let's talk about 5 songs that are on the box set, which is called Keep an Eye on the Sky, that are worth talking about just for your own sake. And the sanity of everyone listening to this. We're not going to talk about alternate mixes, alternate versions, but these are different songs that are worth talking about that never made it on the records. First song, There Was a Light. This is a demo, kind of slow and turgid. An example lyric that really sums it all up. Spending all my time waiting to die. It's just no use. So we're basically here at the first record and leaping over 2 hurdles and smacking right square in the middle of Sister Lovers territory.
And this is one of the songs. So when the Bell-Chilton partnership ended, when Chris left the band, they had a handful of songs and they divided them up. So this is one of them. People will know the song from Chris Bell's version. So this is one of the songs that Chris took with him, though. There is this Big Star demo that exists. So I'm not sure exactly when they divided up the songs. But it's weird to hear Alex sing the song that the Chris version is so, you're so familiar with. But there's gorgeous harmonies on here. And I think Alex's vocal is more convincing than Chris's, actually. But, Chris's version is more produced and it sounds better.
Yeah. It's a good song. I wouldn't say it's a great song, but it's a good one.
Yeah, and so is I Got Kind of Lost, the next one, which is also
I Got Kind of Lost is cool. I mean, definitely sloppy and definitely of demo quality, but as a song, it seems like a perfect 50-50 meld of the introspective and the rockin' sides of the band.
Yeah, and it's I think the lyric, especially as a Chris lyric, like, I can't believe I'm on my own, seems to speak of, him leaving Big Star so soon. I think Chris's version is a lot better. But, again, this is the Big Star demo, so it's not a finalized version. But I can imagine this sort of song on Radio City.
Yeah, totally. Motel Blues is next, and I'm not going to put this version on the playlist. I've always preferred the live version.
Yes, the live version's way better. Yeah,
it is. It's just not as. That is the ultimate affecting version. When he gets to the end and he sings "Save My Life," I really believe him on the live version.
No, yeah, and we shall say it's a Loudon Wainwright song. It's a cover.
And Loudon's version is not nearly as good as Big Star's.
The live. That's pretty much the highlight of that live album, is that version of Motel Blues.
It totally is. It really is. The next one is my favorite. Gone with the Light has a kind of Zepp, That's the Way, acoustic strummer vibe to it, speaking of Zepp 3 being recorded at Ardent. And then a very amusing lurch into the opening strains of Watch the Sunrise.
I think it's a decent song, not quite up to the level of the other Bell-Chilton compositions on number one record. But yeah, the end of the song has the music that was ultimately used for the intro of Watch the Sunrise.
Yeah. And then the worst of it, Country Morn. I mean, this is interesting, like Watch the Sunrise, but with a much shittier version because the melody just wasn't there yet. So the backing track to me sounds identical.
I think it is, yeah.
But the top line's just all screwy and incomplete. So before the end of 1972, Bell was out of the band. He spent time in the hospital. Actually, he spent time in hospital. In hospital sounds like somebody's having a nervous breakdown.
Right.
If you take out the word "the," he was under psychiatric care, and Chris was a wounded soul. He was a devout, religious soul who was struggling with being gay. This was not a good time for him, by all accounts. There was a lot of fighting, drugs, drinking, all the rest of it.
Well, that's still sort of up to debate, really. Like if he was gay or not. Like no one really knows. He never really talked about it with anybody, and like to this day, his family is really still and understandably, because it's his sexuality and he's gone and can't talk about it. But it is pretty much assumed that he was, and
yeah, also wrestled with for years.
It's really just assumed. It was never really confirmed by anyone, I don't think, but it seems that way. And of course, we should say there's nothing wrong with that. But at the time, it was hard to be a homosexual, living in the South in the early 70s. It was difficult. So I think that added to his problems, not being able to really maybe deal with that.
All right, so what happened was Chris's brother David recognized that there was a downward spiral going on, and he got Chris the hell out of Dodge. So he went to Europe. He did some gigging. He met Jeff Emmerich and Paul McCartney. Emmerich actually wound up mixing I Am the Cosmos, but Bell wound up back in Memphis working at his family's fast food chain. He formed a new band. Things were apparently going well, and then one night, driving home alone from a late rehearsal a couple nights after Christmas in '78, he hit a telephone pole and died instantly. And he was 27. His solo work, except for I Am the Cosmos itself, the song, went unreleased until 1992. And unfortunately, that's all we have of Chris Bell. He's going to appear through the rest of the story, but we've heard mostly what we're going to hear from him.
Yeah.
Phase 2, What's Going On? The Last Vestiges of Wishful Thinking, 1973 to 74. So now we're at Radio City, 1974. So now there's tension in the band, Bart, because this record, which couldn't fail, failed. So there was actual physical fighting between some of the members. And then in November 72, Bell quit. So work continued on songs for the second album. So in late 72, so again, we're talking like days or weeks after he'd initially quit, Bell quit the band again, and by the end of the year, Big Star had disbanded. Do they continue as a band, or do they fragment into a million pieces and never get it together for another LP? Guess you'll just have to tune in and find out on Discography, seeing as that information does not exist in any form elsewhere. See you next week on Discography.